The alarms were screaming before I even opened my eyes. I rolled out of my bunk and hit the cold floor of the station with both feet, my heart already pounding harder than it had in years. Red light pulsed through the corridor outside my quarters. Somewhere down the hall, a voice was shouting coordinates, and I knew, in that first breath, that everything I had believed about peace was about to be tested. My name is Daniel Foss. I am a fleet liaison for the Human Compact Division, stationed on the border relay known as Harmony Point. For 12 years, my job was simple: keep the peace, smooth over misunderstandings, remind both sides that restraint was strength. I believed it too. I believed every word of it, right up until the moment the alarms would not stop. I grabbed my jacket and ran into the corridor, where Lyra Voss, my second in command, was already waiting with a datapad in her hand and a look on her face I had never seen before. Lyra was steady. Lyra did not panic, but her hands were shaking. "Talon Colony," she said. "It has gone dark. All of it. No response, no beacons, nothing." I felt the floor tilt under me, though it had not moved at all. Talon was not a military post. Talon was a farming colony. 80,000 people who grew food for 3 systems, who had never held a weapon in their lives, who trusted the Compact to protect them because that was the entire point of the treaties we had signed. That was the whole reason humanity agreed to hold itself back in the first place. "Who did this?" I asked, though some small, cold part of me already suspected the answer. "The Ordoth Assembly," she said. "Their ships were seen leaving the system less than an hour ago. The Ordoth, an old species, proud and slow to change, who had sat on the Compact Council since before humanity even had ships that could leave our own solar system. They had never liked us. They tolerated us, the way an old man tolerates a loud neighbor he cannot get rid of. And now, it seemed, their patience had run out before ours had. I did not wait for permission. I ran for the command deck, and Lyra ran beside me, and by the time we reached the doors, half the station's staff were already there, staring at screens that showed nothing but silence where a colony used to be. The station commander, a broad-shouldered man named Elias Cray, stood at the center of it all, with his jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle jumping in his cheek. "Talk to me," I said. "Long-range sensors caught the tail end of it," Elias said. "Ordoth cruisers dropped out of the shadow lanes, hit the colony's shield grid, and then the grid just failed. No warning shots, no demands. They did not even try to negotiate. That is a direct violation of the Compact," I said. "Article 1. No first strike against a civilian population, under any circumstance." "I know the article, Daniel," Elias said. "I wrote half the reports that reference it, but knowing they broke the law does not bring back 80,000 people." I felt something crack open inside my chest, something I did not have a name for yet. I had spent my whole career trusting that the rules meant something, that if we followed them, if we held ourselves back, if we proved again and again that humanity could be trusted with restraint, the galaxy would treat us fairly in return. I was wrong, and I was about to find out exactly how wrong. Within the hour, a channel opened from Earth Command itself, a direct line that I had never once seen activated in my entire career. The voice that came through was calm, but there was an edge under the calm that made every hair on my arm stand up. "This is Fleet Admiral Renata Okafor," the voice said. "All compact restriction protocols are suspended, effective immediately. I repeat, all restriction protocols are suspended. Full authorization is granted for defensive and retaliatory action against the Ordoth Assembly and any allied forces. Command will follow with detailed orders. Hold your positions and prepare." The room went silent. Lyra looked at me, and I looked at Elias, and none of us said anything for a long moment, because we all understood what those words actually meant. For as long as I had served, humanity had lived under a leash, not because we were weak, because we had agreed, decades ago, after the first contact wars, to hold back our full capability as a gesture of good faith. Our shipyards built only what the Compact allowed. Our weapons research was capped. Our fleets were kept small, deliberately, visibly small, so that no one would ever again call humanity a threat. I had always assumed that leash was permanent. I had always assumed it was real. I was about to learn that it had only ever been a choice. 3 hours later, I stood on the observation deck and watched something I will never forget for the rest of my life. Ships began arriving in the system, not 2 or 3, not a small honor guard. Dozens of vessels, sleek and dark, dropping out of transit lanes I did not even know existed, forming up in formations that looked less like a fleet and more like a living machine. "Where did these come from?" Lyra whispered beside me. I did not have an answer. None of us did. These were not the ships listed in any compact registry. These were not the aging cruisers we had shown off at diplomatic summits to prove how small and unthreatening we were. These were something else entirely. Something that had clearly been built in secret, tested in secret, and kept ready for a day none of us had believed would ever come. A young officer named Corey Bennett ran up beside me, breathless, holding a tablet with shaking hands. "Sir, I just pulled the specs from Fleet Command," he said. "These ships have been in production for 11 years. 11 years, sir. Hidden in shipyards we were told did not exist. 11 years. I tried to do the math in my head and could not make it work. 11 years meant this had been planned long before the Talon attack. It meant someone, somewhere in Earth Command, had never actually believed the peace would last. It meant humanity had been holding back the entire time, not because it lacked the strength to do otherwise, but because it was waiting. Waiting for a line to be crossed. The Ordath assembly had just crossed it. I felt something strange settle over me as I watched those ships arrange themselves in the black. It was not joy, and it was not anger, not exactly. It was something quieter and colder. It was the feeling of finally understanding a joke that had been told at your own expense for years, and realizing, all at once, that you were the one holding all the cards the whole time. Admiral Okafor's voice returned to the channel, and this time, every screen on the station lit up with her image. She stood in a command center I did not recognize, surrounded by officers who looked as tired and as resolved as I felt. To every human citizen listening, she said, "I will not pretend this is a happy day. We lost a colony. We lost people who trusted us to keep them safe, and I will carry that loss for the rest of my life. But I want to be clear about what happens next, so there is no confusion, and so history remembers this moment accurately." She paused, and even through the screen, I could feel the weight of what she was about to say. For decades, we agreed to limit ourselves, because we believed that trust and restraint would build a lasting peace. We kept that promise. We kept it even when others did not. Today, the Ordath Assembly broke every principle this compact was built on. They attacked civilians without warning, without cause, and without mercy. That ends the agreement we made to hold ourselves back. It does not end because we want war. It ends because peace built on one side following the rules while the other side ignores them was never peace at all. Her voice hardened, just slightly, but enough that I felt it in my bones. We are not the fleet you remember. We were never meant to stay that fleet forever. Today, humanity stops holding back. The channel closed, and for a moment, nobody on the observation deck moved. Then Elias let out a breath I do not think he realized he had been holding, and Lyra reached over and gripped my arm so tightly it almost hurt. "What do we do now?" she asked. "Our jobs," I said, though my voice did not sound entirely like my own. "We hold the line, and we let the fleet do what it was built to do." Over the next 2 days, I watched the shape of the galaxy change in real time. Reports came in from a dozen different fronts. Ordath outposts near the border, ones that had spent years mocking our slow ships and our careful diplomacy, found themselves facing vessels that moved faster and reacted quicker than anything in their own fleets. Human pilots, trained for years under strict simulation limits that had quietly been lifted, flew with a precision that stunned even our own analysts. I sat in the command room for nearly 40 hours straight, watching Corey Bennett relay updates as they came through, watching Lyra coordinate supply lines that suddenly had far more resources available than any of us had known existed. Somewhere in those hours, I stopped feeling like a diplomat trying to prevent conflict, and started feeling like a witness to something enormous, something that had been building quietly for over a decade, while the rest of the galaxy assumed humanity was exactly as small as it appeared. The Ordath Assembly sent messages, first defiant, then confused, then, within 72 hours, openly desperate. Their council demanded to speak with compact leadership, insisting that the retaliation was disproportionate, that humanity had broken the treaties by revealing hidden capability. Admiral Okafor's response, which I later heard secondhand from Elias, was short and direct. Humanity had never promised to stay weak forever. It had promised to hold back so long as good faith was returned. The moment that faith was broken, the promise ended with it. I remember the exact moment I understood, fully and completely, what had actually happened. It was on the third day, when Lyra called me over to a side terminal, showing a tactical map of the border region. Human ships had not simply defended Talon's ruins, or pushed back the attacking cruisers. They had moved with purpose toward every Ordath position that had ever threatened a human colony, methodically, without hesitation, and without a single unnecessary step. "They are not attacking to destroy," Lyra said quietly, studying the map. "Look at the pattern. They are disabling communication arrays, weapons platforms, shipyards. They are taking away the Ordath's ability to do this again. Nothing more." I stared at the screen for a long time. "That is restraint," I said finally. "Just a different kind." Lyra looked at me surprised. We spent years being told restraint meant staying small, I continued. Staying quiet, never showing our full strength so nobody would be afraid of us. But maybe restraint was never about hiding what we could do. Maybe it was about choosing not to do more than what was necessary, even when we finally could. She did not answer right away, but I saw something shift in her expression. The same thing I felt shifting in my own chest. A kind of clarity that comes only after a long-held belief cracks apart and reforms into something sturdier. On the 5th day, the Ordeth Assembly requested a formal ceasefire. Admiral Okafor accepted, but only after every disabled outpost near human territory had been confirmed incapable of launching another surprise strike. She did not ask for surrender. She did not ask for territory. She asked for one thing only, stated plainly in the new terms that would replace the old compact agreement. Total transparency. No hidden fleets, no secret strikes, and full accountability for any future violation, enforced not by trust alone, but by verified inspection, on both sides. I was part of the delegation sent to finalize those terms 2 weeks later, standing in a chamber filled with representatives from a dozen species, all of them watching humanity with an expression I had never seen directed at us before. It was not the old dismissive tolerance. It was not simple fear either. It was something closer to careful respect, the kind you give to something you finally understand you had never truly measured correctly. An Ordath elder named Vesik Thal approached me after the formal session ended, his species equivalent of an apology written plainly across the deep lines of his face. "We believed your restraint was weakness," he said through the translator device at his collar. "We believed a species that limited itself so willingly must have nothing greater to offer. We were fools." "You were not entirely wrong," I said. "We did limit ourselves. We chose to. That was never weakness. That was patience. But patience is not the same as forever." He studied me for a long moment, then bowed his head slightly, a gesture I later learned was reserved only for those the Ordath considered equals. I returned to Harmony Point 3 weeks after the attack on Talon, and the station looked different to me somehow, though nothing about its structure had changed. What had changed was me. I walked the same corridors, sat in the same command chair, worked alongside the same people, but I no longer carried the quiet, nagging doubt I used to feel whenever I explained the compact restrictions to newer officers. I no longer wondered whether humanity's restraint made us look weak in the eyes of the galaxy. I understood now that it never had. It had simply made us patient, and patience, when it finally runs out, does not look like anger. It looks like readiness. Lyra found me one evening on the observation deck, staring out at the stars the way I had done the night the alarms first went off. She stood beside me quietly for a while before speaking. "Do you regret any of it?" she asked. "The years we spent holding back?" I thought about the question carefully before answering, because it deserved a careful answer. "No," I said. "I think holding back is what gave the fleet time to grow into what it became. If we had shown everything from the start, the Ordath would have seen us as a threat immediately, and this war would have started decades earlier, over something far smaller than Talon. Instead, we waited. We built, we proved again and again that we could be trusted, and when trust was broken, we were ready, not because we wanted to fight, but because we had never stopped preparing for the possibility that we might have to." "And now?" she asked. "What happens now?" I looked out at the stars, at the quiet dark where, not long ago, an entire colony had gone silent forever, and where new treaties, new understandings, and a new kind of respect were slowly beginning to take shape. "Now," I said, "the galaxy knows exactly what we are capable of. Not because we bragged about it, not because we paraded it around to make anyone afraid. They know because we showed them, once, when it mattered, and then we stopped. That is the whole point, Lyra. Strength that never has to be repeated. Strength that only ever needs to be proven once." She nodded slowly, and for a long moment neither of us said anything else. The stars stretched out endlessly beyond the viewport, calm and steady, the same way they had looked the night before everything changed, and the same way, I hoped, they would look for a very long time to come. I still think about Talon sometimes. I think about the 80,000 people who never got the chance to see what came after, who never knew that their loss would become the reason an entire galaxy finally understood what humanity truly was. We were never the weak ones. We were never the ones who needed protecting. We were simply the ones who chose, for as long as choosing made sense, to hold ourselves back. And when that choice was taken from us, we did not become something new. We became, finally, exactly what we had always quietly been.